let's flesh out that depression, shall we? So Thursday night, May 2nd, the New York Knicks defeated the
Yeah,
Philadelphia
okay. We
76ers.
know. Stop that. No long intro.
So,
Yes,
first
now that-
reactions from a 76ers fan. Let's get that first.
My first reaction was, this was our second round. This makes sense. I mean, we had the play-in this year as our first round of the playoffs, right?
Right.
So, this series against the Knicks was our second round.
And that's why you
And
choked.
that means- yes, that is why we lost that game.
Yeah.
And
You actually lost 4 games in the series, so
really, I didn't know that's how it works.
that's how a
Is
best
that
of
why
7 works,
New
yeah.
York Knicks beat Philadelphia 76ers 4-2.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of these games, right? I mean, let's say what it is first. This was one of the most competitive series in the history of at least first rounds that I can imagine, and one of the best series, honestly, that I can imagine in the first round. Even if it wasn't the most pleasure to watch sometimes, every single game was decided within the last 2 minutes, and I really can't remember a time in any other first round series where that happened. Right? Game 1, it was the Josh Hart heroics. Hit a bunch of threes in the fourth quarter. Someone who's not naturally a big 3-point shooter. In Game 2, there was obviously the huge controversy with the Tyrese Maxey turnover into Dante DiVincenzo 3. Game 3 was really the only game where the Sixers kind of pulled away a little bit. They made it an 11-point game by the end, but still, like, that was a very, very close game going to the last few minutes. Game 4 was close. Game 5, that was obviously the overtime game where Tyrese Maxey saved the 76ers season, even if it was just for 48 hours. And Game 6, once again, full circle, Josh Hart hits that three-pointer with 25 seconds left to give the Knicks a 118-115 victory and advance the New York Knicks to the second round for the second straight season. There were points of this series where it was painful to watch Joel Embiid, and I want to give him the slightest bit of credit. He was obviously not playing at 100%. His knee was not reacting the way that he really wanted it to, but he tried to play for his town, for his home city. And obviously whatever's going on with his face, I know he's got Bell's palsy. I don't know what that really
He has
is.
Bell's palsy. Yeah, he got diagnosed with Bell's palsy on the left side of his face.
Yeah,
so
I mean, it looks like he has like a
can't really
stroke.
control his face.
Um,
That is. I think that's like one of the signs that you could have a stroke in the future.
And I mean,
Don't
it
quote
just
me on that,
it was honestly just Joel Embiid was just time and time again not healthy, and it was very evident. But he still had some decent games. The big story of this series though is the fact that Joel Embiid just couldn't keep it going for 4 quarters. Right? He would have some amazing first 3 quarters of games. I think it was Game 3 that they won that he had 50 points. He had that huge burst of threes in the third quarter. He had like 5 or 6 threes in the third quarter. There were a lot of games he had 30, 35 points going into the fourth quarter, and then time and time again, he just could not score in the fourth quarter. He just ran out of gas.
Yeah, and he's an awesome player. He's an MVP level player at his best. And I'm saying this as a Philadelphia fan, like he never is able to finish a season healthy. He's never able to finish a playoff series healthy. And it's like year over year, it's bitten the Sixers in the butt. Really just culminates in this year. I mean, probably this was one of the better supporting casts that the Sixers have had.
In theory, at least.
Yeah, I mean, Buddy, you had Kelly Oubre. Tobias was hypothetically supposed to contribute. We'll get more in depth on what he brings to the team in a minute, and it's not a lot. But this was supposed to be a decent Sixers team. I mean, Paul Reed was supposed to help alleviate the pressure off Embiid, but you saw it in pretty much every game when Embiid was off the court. The Knicks were able to just thoroughly dominate the Sixers. The only reason we were even in the series is because of Maxey. He's an all-star player. And moving forward, I don't know what's going on with this team. I don't know what's what the future is for the Sixers franchise.
Even outside of the four quarters of basketball, I think that 76ers fans are starting to get a little bit tired of Joel Embiid. Like, first of all of the things that he did, there were a lot of dirty plays that Joel Embiid had throughout this series, especially in Game 3. It seems like he was just a wrecking ball. He didn't care about anybody's safety on the Knicks. He even injured Mitchell Robinson. He missed 2 games because he tried to pull down his leg while he was on the ground. I mean, that's not something that anyone should do.
Okay. I'm gonna stop you right there for a second. Sixers were not the only dirty team in the series. Take off those rose tinted glasses for a second. The Knicks definitely were getting physical with the Sixers too.
Physicality is different than dirtiness, though. The Knicks are a physical team.
There were some dirty plays by the Knicks as well. I'm not gonna let you solely bash the Sixers here. I think both teams were dirty.
You sure about that? You sure about that?
I disagree with the fact that the Knicks did anything nearly as dirty as Joel Embiid shenanigans in Game 3. But I digress, right? I just think that my point is that 76ers fans, they love their MVP, right? But the foul baiting, the dirtiness, to me as a Knicks fan, an outside perspective who doesn't watch the 76ers every day, it got tiring really fast. And I can't imagine what that's like as a 76ers fan.
I mean, if you go on like websites like Twitter or Reddit or things like that, yeah, there's a lot of people like that and like a lot of people thanking Joel, but a lot of Sixers fans are really disgruntled and angry at this point. And I don't blame them. I mean, I'm pretty disgruntled and angry too. It's what happens when you lose in the second round for like the millionth time in a row. I mean, this team does not have what it takes. It's pretty obvious. We've had private conversations outside of this video recording. Like, I think they need to blow it up. But that just means going through the process all over again if the Sixers had to blow it up.
Well, so it would be different from the process because you do still have a guy like Tyrese Maxey who's miles better than anyone they had during the process, at least during the first few years of it, right? I mean, let's give the flowers where they're due to Tyrese Maxey, right? He obviously had the 46-point masterclass. He had the Tracy McGrady light kind of performance at the closing seconds of Game 5 where he put the team on his back, forced that game into overtime, and ended up winning. And that did make Knicks fans a little bit uneasy, right? I mean, you took a game 5 in Madison Square Garden. You had momentum going back to your home court. There were the things with Michael Rubin providing thousands of tickets to 76ers fans. Not that it particularly worked. The Knicks fans were still very vocal during Game 6 at Wells Fargo Center. But Tyrese Maxey was absolutely outstanding in this series. And on the other side of the floor, giving credit where it's due as well, Jalen Brunson was magnificent during this series. The first 2 games he struggled. He averaged like 20 points or something, but he was on very, very bad efficiency. But the last 4 games of the series, he scored over 37 points in all 4 of those games, and he had at least 2 40-point games, if not 3 40-point games during that stretch. So Jalen Brunson really figured out what was looking to be a pretty tough Philadelphia 76ers defense and absolutely dominated them in the last 4 games of that series.
Yeah, I mean, he had a rough start to Game 6, I think. He was cold in stretches, but obviously the Knicks came up where it mattered most, and Philadelphia, as we are wont to do, fell short. Man, okay, before we talk about the Knicks and like their expectations moving forward, let's just talk about the Sixers. Like,
the future.
I mentioned it. I don't know what the future is for this team. They cannot go through another rebuild like the process where like their best players were Rookie of the Year Michael Carter-Williams, which I think he was traded off immediately to kick things off, and Robert Covington. The Sixers only really have Embiid under contract.
It's just Embiid. He's the only guaranteed contract at this moment.
Yeah, now they are going to re-sign Maxey.
Yeah. Probably
to the max.
Yeah, he deserves it.
I don't think they're going to bring back Tobias Harris. Let's not manifest that into the world.
I think even if Tobias Harris paid the Philadelphia 76ers, they would not let him back onto that team. I mean, in Game 6, it was unacceptable. He did not score a single point in 29 minutes of play. He was pretty much just out there getting cardio. And throughout this entire series, he was mainly a non-factor. I mean, he was pretty good on defense at points, but that's it. The 76ers will gladly trade him for 3 crumble cookies.
Man, okay, what a terrible contract for the Sixers. Tobias robbed the city of $180 million. That's Kirk Cousins money.
This will go down in history. I mean, to people who were in this time period, who are watching basketball in the early 2020s, right? Tobias Harris, when you look at it, 20 years from now, you're gonna be like, oh, he averaged 18 points during the regular season, blah, blah, blah. Like, he wasn't worth the money. But the people who actually watched Tobias Harris are going to understand this is one of the worst contracts in NBA history. The fact that he stole $150 million from a team that could have had Jimmy Butler, right? That was something in 2019 that they really did pretty much choose Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler. So not only did they lose Jimmy Butler.
No, he chose Ben Simmons and Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler. Let's be honest there. That's an entirely different can of worms, though. I don't even want to start on Ben.
Yeah, that's out of this video's pay grade. But the long story short of it is that Tobias Harris extremely limited the cap flexibility of the 76ers over the last few years, ever since the Jimmy Butler era ended in Philadelphia.
My favorite Tobias stat, though, from his time as a 76er, is whenever Tobias would score 3 or less points, someone would always post something out on social media where it was like crumble cookies eaten 3, and it was Tobias Harris points, and it was like 2. And we got one of the crumble cookie games, game 6. Tobias put up a big fat 0. So best of luck to you, Tobias, with your future endeavors, but please do not get within 20 feet of my basketball team ever again. Thank you. But role players, Kelly Oubre, they traded for this year. Same with Buddy Hyde. I probably pronounced that name wrong. Buddy Hield.
Yeah.
Whatever. They might bring a couple of those guys back. Paul Reed, I think, is a restricted free agent. I don't know that they're going to bring him back. He was pretty inefficient towards the end of the year and in the playoffs. Embiid needs to be surrounded by shooters. Embiid cannot be taking 3-pointers like he has. He needs to be within the free throw line, or up to that. He has a lot of free throw practice.
But I mean, that was kind of the goal this year, right? I mean, you traded for Buddy Hield, you got Nicholas Batum. I mean, they were often running lineups of Tyrese Maxey, either Kyle Lowry or Buddy Hield, Tobias Harris, Nicholas Batum. Those are all good shooters. That they tried that. And this was their best season from a cap flexibility standpoint because they got all those guys on such small contracts. Tyrese Maxey was only making $4 million this year. Cam Payne was making $2 million. He was great throughout the second half of the series. Kelly Oubre was making $2 million, right? Those guys are all going to play themselves into more money. And they are getting off the $40 million of Tobias Harris, but this is not a great free agency class. It's hard to see how the Sixers could get better from this season, if I'm being honest.
Yeah, no. I don't expect them to. Nick Nurse is a great coach, and who knows, maybe he coaches up something we've never seen before. But the Sixers can't bring in a third star. I mean, we could draft Bronny and force LeBron James here, but
I mean, the only option's maybe DeMar DeRozan, right? I mean, it's just it's an upgrade over Tobias Harris. I don't love the fit.
The second he signs in Philadelphia, he will immediately crumble into dust. Man, I don't know. I do think the Sixers have really 2 options here. Neither are good. The first is you can go out and sign another superstar and just hope that works. Put some role players around him. Maybe have Embiid take a backseat to Maxey, because having Embiid as the number 1 option on the team is not working out. They need to change something. Or you trade pretty much everyone, and this is going to sound crazy. You trade Embiid too, while he still has a lot of value. Build around Maxey and shoot for contention 2 or 3 years down the line with the younger core. before.
I can't say that's the avenue I expect to happen, but it's definitely an avenue that I guarantee will at least be explored, and it's definitely going to be an avenue that some fans might want to see the 76ers partake in. But, you know, these top 5, top 10 NBA players don't just get traded willy-nilly like that. So I do have doubts that Joel Embiid will be traded at least this offseason, maybe after one more disappointing season, one more maybe injured postseason for Joel Embiid, that might start to get explored. All right, so let's talk about, just to finish off this video, let's talk about the Knicks and then about what, you know, maybe the Knicks can do throughout the rest of this postseason. So we already talked about Jalen Brunson. I don't think there's too much else to say there. He was fantastic. He was scoring himself. He was getting other guys involved. He did just about, at least in the last 4 games of the series, as much as you could have asked for. Obviously, he was ice cold in the overtime period of Game 5, but that was more of a coaching thing, in my opinion. He was the only Knick to take a shot, I believe, in that entire overtime period. So he was just tired and he couldn't do anything. But I mentioned in the beginning parts of the video, Josh Hart was doing absolutely everything in this series. He was one of the leading rebounders throughout the first round of the entire playoffs. So many offensive rebounds, so many hustle plays. Hit timely threes, he was passing the ball. I mean, he was doing absolutely everything for the Knicks, and there were a lot of games he never came off the floor. In that overtime Game 5, he played all 53 minutes. I mean, Josh Hart has an unbelievable motor and was so important to the Knicks in winning this series, and someone who came clutch in the last few games of the series as well. I mean, obviously Dante DiVincenzo had the big Game 6 and the big shot in Game 2, but OG Anunoby and Isaiah Hartenstein were fantastic throughout a good part of the series as well. Isaiah Hartenstein was defending Joel Embiid about as well as someone can. I mean, he got a lot of ticky-tacky fouls on Joel Embiid that sometimes made him sit a little bit early in some quarters and halves, but he gave Joel Embiid a good amount of problems, even if the stat sheet doesn't say so. I mean, there's still a lot of games he had 35 points, but he did frustrate Embiid on a good amount of possessions. And OG Anunoby, obviously with his amazing defense he played throughout the entire series, also hit some clutch mid-range jumpers, some pull-up mid-range jumpers when the offense was a little clunky, and hit some big three-pointers as well. So, I mean, that's pretty much the Knicks rotation, right? I mean, they played a 7 to 8 man rotation throughout this entire series. That is the Tom Thibodeau way, but that 7-man rotation of those 5 starters, Miles McBride and Mitchell Robinson, it does not have a lot of holes. I mean, it is a very, very fluid 7-man rotation. So I guess, what do you think the Knicks can do in round 2 against the Indiana Pacers with that being said?
Yeah, I mean, my extent of basketball knowledge is pretty limited outside of the Sixers. But I do think New York has a deeper team than Indiana, than a lot of the teams in the league. For being honest, going 7, 8, maybe 9 men deep in the rotation and on the bench. They have home court advantage. I think New York, if Tom Thibodeau does not play his stars for like 50 minutes a game like he always does, I think New York can use that depth advantage, rotate guys in and out, to stay fresh throughout this series. I do think they'd end up beating the Pacers. I think Brunson is a better player than Tyrese Haliburton. They have a bit of a different skill set, but I would think overall I'd rather have Brunson.
Yeah, I mean, I like that point you mentioned about the Knicks, having to rest their guys a little bit. Tom Thibodeau maybe putting Josh Hart, Jalen Brunson, OG Anunoby, giving them a little bit more rest throughout the Pacers series, and I think that will be possible. Not saying that I think that the Pacers are significantly worse than the 76ers, but I do think that there will be games that are a little bit more blowout, either for one side or the other side in that game, just because it is, the Indiana Pacers high-profile offense going against the Knicks high-profile defense. The games will not be as tightly contested as this first-round series, and it's going to be important for the Knicks to stay fresh because the Pacers do love to run in transition. That's a thing that is much different than the 76ers. Besides Tyrese Maxey, no one was really pushing the ball up the floor in transition, which allowed the Knicks to be super, super aggressive on the offensive glass. Because if you're committing a bunch of guys to the offensive glass and they get a rebound, they can run in transition, you're going to have a 2-on-1 or something like that. So the Knicks are going to probably have to dial it down a little bit on the offensive glass during the Indiana Pacers series. But I do like how the Knicks match up against the Pacers, right? They don't have a great answer for Jalen Brunson. It might be Tyrese Halliburton guarding him. It might be someone like Aaron Nesmith, who's got a little bit more length. That's kind of what the 76ers opted to do with Nicholas Batum and Kelly Oubre for a lot of the series. But I think that Jalen Brunson's going to have another good series. I think OG Anunoby is one of the best guys you could having guarding Pascal Siakam. He's very familiar with him from both of their time in Toronto. And they don't have a extremely intimidating offensive rebounder or defensive rebounder. I mean, they have Siakam and Miles Turner, but I still think that Isaiah Hartenstein and Mitchell Robinson will be able to take advantage on the glass and get the Knicks some extra opportunities. If I had to make a guess right now, I would say that the Knicks would win in 6 or 7 games. And like you said, the Celtics are a tough opponent, but let's not think about that too much, not think about too much in hypotheticals, because obviously the Knicks and Celtics have not qualified for the Eastern Conference Finals yet. So that being said, any final takes on this 76ers versus Knicks series?
This team finds new and innovative ways to disappoint me every year. I'm going to fully expect the same in 2025. That being said, I'm in. I'm in, man. Draft Bronny, sign LeBron, do whatever it takes to try and win a championship, because I do not think the Sixers ownership or front office has the courage to blow it up like they probably should.